Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Gedunk podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Bobby Jones. It is getting to be late February now, so
Yep.
spring is around the corner. Bobby, how's the weather down in Georgia, man?
Well, it's rainy, which is better than snowy. That's kind of been. So we have like 12 seasons down south. We had fake summer, fake spring here about 3 weeks ago, and
Yep.
then now we're back. We just got done with winter's revenge, and now it's more like transition season. I don't know.
Yeah.
Between February and May, you really don't know what to expect.
When can you start? I mean, when can you plant a garden down there?
Really? Usually, in my opinion, late March, April, because that leads to what they call the great pollinating.
Yeah.
The pollinating down here, which is insane. And everything is covered in yellow. It's pretty ridiculous now that I think about it. But you just learn to deal with it. Contrary to popular belief, this part of the South, you have not 4 seasons, but like I said, about 6, 7, 8 different seasons.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's
Right
rough.
on,
Georgia's
man. Well,
something else.
it's 8 degrees still here up in Vermont, and we just got about 14 inches of snow over the weekend. So we're still doing winter up here. The sugaring season's going to come up pretty soon, though, man. And I'm
The
going to go
sugaring season?
Yeah, the maple trees. The maple trees. You got to get them. You put the taps in. What you want is you want warm days and cold nights. So we're not quite there. But, if you get 35, 40 degrees during the day and then down to 20 at night, that's ideal. And that's when you get your sap flow, and then you can start boiling and making maple syrup and all that good stuff. So we're probably a few weeks away from that still. Usually it's a March, early April kind of thing up here. Well, great. It is a pleasure to talk to you guys again. Thank you for all the support. We've been loving the comments on YouTube and all that stuff, and we got some good things we're going to go into today. Bobby, you want to take it away?
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the things that kind of piqued your interest. Number one, Ukraine. What's the latest and greatest and what it means and why? This is really, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, the first great diplomatic test of the 21st century. We're literally setting a benchmark, and it's ironic because it's about 100 years since the last time the world tried to set a benchmark on what's acceptable behavior and what's not. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of soft power. So I've kind of talked a little bit about this with USAID and these things, but we're really going to show you why a group like USAID matters and how it's helped the average American.
Yep.
We're going to talk a little bit about a great statesman that showed through his actions what it means to be a leader, at the late, great Congressman John Lewis. We're also going to obviously have our A-Bow segment, where we talk about some of the most ridiculous things you've never heard of. And then we'll get into a little bit of sports towards the end, which is going to be definitely in Dan's wheelhouse when we talk about
Good fights this
combat
weekend,
sports.
guys. Good fights this week. We got
Yep.
an exciting card in boxing coming up. So, but yeah, let's dive in. So Ukraine, a lot of news coming out of this with the first sort of diplomatic overture from the Trump organization. So Russian and American negotiators have not come to a deal, but they met for the first time in Saudi Arabia. Marco Rubio, U.S. Secretary of State, went over there, and to cut through the bullshit, things are not looking good for the Ukrainians and for Zelensky and really for NATO. So the Russian diplomatic team and the American diplomatic team have decided that they will negotiate vis-a-vis the Ukraine conflict, and they will not include European partners. So the Poles, the Latvians, Lithuanians, all these people that are directly affected by this conflict have no seat at the table as part of the negotiations.
To include Ukraine.
To include Ukraine, which is bananas, right? Ukrainians who have been fighting a war for survival, for national survival now for 3 years, have not been invited to these peace talks with the Russians. The Pete Hegseth went over to the Munich Security Conference, talked over there, gave a speech over there, said that the Ukrainians are going to have to give up territory. J.D. Vance went over to Europe and gave a speech at a security conference as well, and kind of basically gave away the farm for nothing. It's like, do these guys even know how to negotiate? My 6-year-old knows how to negotiate better, right? He wants a cookie. Yep. He's going to come at me and be like, hey, I want ice cream and a cookie. And, maybe I'm going to come back and be like, how about an apple? And he's going to be like, no. How about just a cookie, not the ice cream? And then we come to a deal where, he wins something, right? And we're not doing that from the get-go. We're telling him our actual kind of end position, perhaps from the get-go. And we're not even including the people who are most directly affected, the people who have bled and died for this. And, Bobby, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on it, but it seems to me that the West, and by the West I include Ukraine, we're the ones in a position of strength here. We're not, the Russians are the ones who have had 750,000 casualties in a 3-year war, who are suffering under sanctions from essentially the entire world minus China and North Korea. And Putin is the one who is at risk here. He's got everything to lose, and we're just giving him everything to gain. So it's really baffles me, the U.S. negotiating strategy out of the gate, especially for a man who, claims to be this great negotiator in the art of the deal and the like.
Well, it's not baffling if you consider that Trump does not care about Ukraine. And the reason he does not care about Ukraine is because he sees Putin as his superior. I'm going to say it like that. We have an American president that kowtows to the leader of Russia. Now, conservatives, Republicans, you can tell me whatever you want. I am looking at the actions. There is no way in hell that any former Republican president, any former Democrat president would accept this, because what they're saying on the negotiation table from the master negotiator is the 20% of the land that Russia has occupied, they get to keep. Ukraine is not going to be allowed to join NATO. And basically, Zelensky needs to move out of the way for another leader.
That's the most insane part to me, right? Like, think about that for a second. The Russians are saying, as a condition of peace, the president of Ukraine needs to leave. And we're like, okay, that sounds reasonable.
And here's the question that I have. What is Russia giving up?
Yeah.
Not a damn thing.
Nothing.
Everything that they wanted to do, they're able to do. Now, for these Americans that are like, the war, first of all, you weren't fighting the war in Ukraine. So miss me with that whole, America, all we were doing was supplying weapons that, by the way, was putting money in American defense pockets.
Exactly.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, we have allowed two people who are from outside the borders of the United States to dictate the direction of this country. One domestically in Elon Musk, one internationally in Vladimir Putin. This is what's happened in less than a month of the Trump administration. In less than a month, an 80-year alliance is basically gone by the wayside. Okay? In less than a month.
The most successful alliance
in history.
Of all time, right?
In history.
Everyone wants managed to join.
Look. NATO, for all of the issues it may have, has stopped a third world war that would be fought with nuclear weapons from occurring. We went from a period of time where from 1919 to 1930, that's 20 years, we had two major conflicts that cost the world over 100 million people and wiped out a generation.
Yep.
Okay. To a place of relative stability when it comes to the death by war count. That doesn't mean there weren't regional conflicts, but never has a nuclear weapon been fired in destructive purposes since. Okay?
Yep.
We have now undermined that organization. We, the people who fought to establish it, we have capitulated, surrendered to the power that NATO was constructed to keep at bay. We now have the European nations coming together and rearming themselves. Wait, where did we hear this before? Oh, right, leading up to 1914.
Yeah.
We heard the same exact thing, forming little separate alliances with their weapons again, because they do not believe in being able to stand up to Russia. And here's the other piece too. Part of this deal too, the rumors, not confirmed, but rumors that, hey, the United States is going to withdraw troops from Europe.
Yeah. Bobby, do you remember, one of my
Good Lord.
earliest memories, I think, not earliest memories, but earliest memories of like the world around me was the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Yes.
And, Ronald Reagan would be turning over in his grave right now.
Yep.
The dude who said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. We've now gone to Mr. Putin. Please be nice to me. I'm scared of you. Right. Like I'm just a hawk on Russia. Like these guys are a bunch of bullies and we can kick their ass at will. Yep. And we should start acting like it. I mean, I was thinking the other day about, Charlie Wilson's War and the good movie, great book. And so Charlie Wilson, if you don't know, he was this congressman from Texas back in the 70s and 80s. Had a reputation as something of a player on the Washington social scene. He was actually a Naval Academy guy from Texas, and he wanted to arm the Mujahideen. And he was very concerned about the Soviet Union. And so when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan in 1980, the U.S. started arming the resistance to fight back against the Soviets. And, the CIA, they had a small little section that was at work. I think the quote is there's one CIA guy who's talking to this other CIA guy, Gus Avocados, who becomes sort of the main character in the movie. But he's like, "Hey man, you want to come upstairs? We're killing Russians up here," and like, where did that go? Right? Why are we scared of these guys? Right?
Man,
I mean, how come there's not some Texas congressman right now who is championing, like, let's let the Ukrainians defend their land, let's let them kill Russians, and let's pat them on the back and say attaboy, because it's better that they do it than we have to do it, right?
Well, I think it's very simple. Putin sees Trump as his lapdog, whatever he has on him, and the Republican Party is looked at like their lapdogs to Donald Trump. It's a trickle-down effect.
No, you're right.
And here's the thing, right? So just here today, Trump basically tweets out that Zelensky is a dictator and should be removed. This is coming from a man who, in the last 48 hours, has said, if my actions are basically doing what it takes to save the country, they can't violate law. Basically, he's saying, I am the law.
Yep.
Very Napoleonic. And I don't even remember the exact quote. I was just like, we have never in the history of this country had a president be bold enough to say that. Right? Then the executive order that came because of that he said only he and the attorney general can dictate what American law is. We're heading towards a constitutional crisis.
Oh, we're there.
Yeah, and it's being exacerbated by what's happening abroad, right? Because the two main themes that are happening here, one domestic, one international, is the established norms that are supported by law have been tossed to the side by one individual. One.
Yeah, and
One.
there's another angle here, man. I and I'm bear with me for a second.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there's this angle, Ukraine. I didn't think about Ukraine at all until the first Trump impeachment, and there's an angle to that. There's something there, like you know, Hunter Biden and Burisma and Zelensky and the whole first impeachment thing. He's a guy who is so sort of reptilian and transactional in his worldview. I truly think he believes that on some level that Zelensky kind of embarrassed him, because it was his phone call, right? His perfect phone call that led to his first impeachment. And, I think there's some degree of, well, here's my chance to get back at Zelensky, even though Zelensky wasn't the one who impeached him, right? Zelensky just happened to be on the phone. It was what Trump said that led to his impeachment. But there's some, he has this genuine dislike for Zelensky, and I think it's rooted not just in the fact that Zelensky's a badass who doesn't take shit from some guy like Putin, but I also think that Trump has personal beef with this guy who he sees as somebody who contributed to some egg on his face back in Trump term one. So
I think you have something there. And I think because Zelensky then strived and came into his own after the invasion and the world admired him, I think Trump's also jealous of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because people see him as an actual leader, very, for lack of a better term, very masculine. Once the invasion happened, he grows the beard. He's in fatigue. He is not leaving. He's giving messages as, Kyiv is being bombed, and he's like, I'm still here. You got people like Klitschko and stuff grabbing their Ma Deuce and putting it on their shoulders like we're going to go kill Russians. I was like, man.
There's this video from, I think it was the 60th anniversary of D-Day in France, and like Zelensky was there, and there's some old U.S. D-Day vet who had like jumped on D-Day or been in one of the beaches or something like that, and it's a really kind of touching scene where he says, "Hey, thank you, you saved Europe," and then Zelensky's like, "No, you saved Europe," and it's this really like game recognizes game kind of moment.
Yeah, it was like at the 80th.
They're like, "Hey, man, I see you," and Donald Trump is, if nothing else, he is not that, right? Like Donald Trump, you don't want. God, I wouldn't want Donald Trump's help changing a tire in a rainstorm, let alone doing a foot patrol. So I think you're right. There's some degree of jealousy because he's the real deal.
It's a jealousy because it's the validity of the culture that Zelensky has demonstrated to the world, vice the projection of how Trump wants to be viewed by the world. And that juxtaposition is killing him. Yeah. And so for him to remove that from the scene at all cost is imperative to him. You send your Secretary of Defense abroad for the first time, and you're like, I want to blow up this alliance. And the reason, to be honest, that you want to blow up the alliance is because that alliance is steadfast saying we need to support Ukraine. Yep. They're fighting a war for us that will stop a larger war from fighting. Well, unfortunately for NATO, I guess, they admire a guy who has actually acted the way he needed to talk and talk the way he needed to act, right? And that's hard for someone like for someone like Donald Trump, and to be completely honest, Pete Hegseth to understand too, right? Because even though he wore the uniform, there's a reason. There's a reason he was just a major with that background. There's a reason. There's a failure and disconnect of leadership somewhere there, right? And so if you look at his body language when he's sitting with the rest of the leaders over there at NATO, he felt uncomfortable. And I think it went beyond the message. He knew what he was saying was going to be controversial, but he did not like sitting there with other people who are more accomplished than he is.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I think that's true, man.
Have you seen him have a joint conference, a press conference with the Joint Chiefs of Staff yet?
No, I have not. I don't.
Neither have I.
Yeah.
Neither have I.
Right.
And I think that's by design. He hasn't been there with General Brown. They haven't did a joint conference. This is by design, because any of these 4-stars who, apparently are under the little review or whatever, right, stand next to him, he feels dwarfed.
Hegseth's an interesting guy too, man, because there's this, it sort of happens in every war, and there's always this kind of relatively junior, I'd almost say it's a junior officer thing, although I certainly think they're kind of, there's an enlisted analogy to it, but you get these JOs, guys like James Webb, coming out of Vietnam, who, and I'm sure it was more prevalent in World War II, and although we won in World War II, but you get these people who kind of come out of these conflicts, and they weren't really high ranking. They didn't really have any sort of operational or let alone strategic wherewithal. But they say, hey, if we just got a little tougher, man, if we're tougher, and if we had just killed more people, and stacking more bodies in Afghanistan was not going to get it done.
No.
Killing the right people in Afghanistan, would have been helpful.
Right.
But just globally, like killing more people, or same with Iraq. It's not. That was a counterinsurgency, and so every bomb we dropped, we killed one insurgent, we made 4 more. And it takes somebody with a little bit of not just humility, but an ability to think critically about what you're trying to do to identify a better way forward in those types of conflicts. And every conflict, that the U.S. is in, we get these people who are like, we would have won Vietnam if only we'd, executed more VC or whatever it is. And it's not really, that's not the way it works, guys. It's not, it's not, war is not about who's tougher. That's the simplest. Give me the nerds, man. Give me the nerds who know how to fly drones, and we'll go win some battles for you. It doesn't. It's not important who does the push-ups.
I totally agree. And to take it a step further, this whole mentality of having like the biggest guns, the biggest balls, the biggest this and other, where the situations require a nuanced approach, a scalpel rather than a hammer, is why you have career professionals in government, right? And we are neutering all of that as we speak. You name the subject, that government organization is getting crushed by it, for it, because of it. And it's literally leaving blunt, neophyte, borderline idiots in the subject matter that we're talking about, right? And so that transitions me into the whole discussion about soft power, right? USAID has gotten a lot of press because it's basically been eradicated here since Trump came into office. Now, we can talk about the major aspects of, the richest man in the world is trying to hurt the poorest people on the planet, which is true. But what this shows me is a blatant misunderstanding of what soft power is and how critical it's been to shaping the world as we know it in the 20th and 21st century. But most importantly, it has been completely underestimated by the Trump administration as far as how effective it actually is. Right. So let me give you some history real quick. The first real modern definition or modern example of soft power given and used by the United States goes back to really World War I, right? World War I, the doughboys that fought in the trenches in Europe, there were two major things that they were able to take with them that were given by American companies, right? It wasn't necessarily a war ration yet, but one was Coca-Cola, right? And the other was Hershey's chocolate. Hershey's, right? They actually made Hershey's chocolate a ration that was put in your meal kit, MRE type things back then, right? And it became its own currency. Both of those products became their own currency. And as the war went on, other things like Campbell's soup became a thing during both of those world wars, where it was a way to break the ice amongst soldiers, amongst allies, even amongst enemies. The great story of the Christmas Day soccer match, right? Things like that were exchanged. American products, unmistakably American, right? Fast forward to World War II. Spam, that great meat conglomeration that I actually like. Spam, peanut butter, American peanut butter specifically, Skippy and Jif, that were put in rations, along with now Coke is not a ration, but something that, what became NWR basically wanted to make happen at all bases. They actually established local bottling companies all over the world via World War II to have Coke readily available. But once the war ended, wait,
I got to back up. So this is such an interesting topic because the stuff that, the stuff that we put in military rations, let's come back to this. Let's stick a pin in this because the stuff that we put in military rations is like a fascinating story. But continue.
Yeah, very much so. That deserves its own topic, right? But basically, American products that were given to GIs that went abroad. And then right in the immediate aftermath of the war, they're rebuilding London. I have friends of mine that are British whose parents talk about how they were given a Hershey's chocolate bar when they were under the strictest of rations because there was no food. And they thought it was Christmas, right? And this happened all over the world, right? And so there was one particular war vet that took notice of this and understood that the Marshall Plan, as much money that was being spent rebuilding Europe, rebuilding Japan, the things that got to the people on the ground was an M&M bar or a Coke bottle or this, that, and the other. So when that war vet was elected to the presidency in 1960, John F. Kennedy, he established USAID. Because he saw firsthand, being in the islands, being all over the world in the South Pacific during that war, how much was able to be accomplished by simple American kindness. It's not a coincidence he also established the Peace Corps at the same time. Okay? These two entities allowed America into places that historically would have seen us as hostile, help change the narrative on what the American experience and experiment was. And here's the thing, had other nations aspire to be able to experience the same things. USAID has done more to open the doors for America, its values, than any military force we've ever put on the ground, ever. Right now, because USAID is defunded, you have clinics in Africa to include, prenatal health care, STDs, AIDS epidemic, all that done. There is no backup to them, right? You have people, you can Google these reports if you think I'm making up, that have died waiting outside of USAID funded hospitals. Now, these guys are going to cherry pick, and when I say these guys, the Trump administration is going to cherry pick, right, what they think is fraud, waste, and abuse, blah, blah. That's fine. But understand this. You are neutering the most effective tool of diplomacy America has ever deployed. And I'm not just saying this because it sounds good. I dealt with USAID personally for a year in Africa. And I'm telling you now, it got me into doors that I never thought we'd be able to get into as a peacekeeping
Sure.
force.
Yeah.
Right? And here's the thing. That candy bar that you think's not a big deal that USAID will give a kid, or that meal, is right there when that kid, especially that young man, is teetering on becoming extreme or becoming moderate.
Yeah.
And you
Bobby,
don't know what that kid will become.
When you're rolling around Africa or the Middle East, how many times did you see a kid wearing like a LeBron jersey or a Kobe jersey,
All the time.
right? Like
All
all
the
the
time.
time, man. It's
All
all
the
the
time.
time. You know, these
All the time.
kids globally, right? They don't know what Article 1 of the US Constitution
Nope.
is, but they know who fucking LeBron James is, man.
Yep.
And
Yep.
like that is, you know, that kind of desire to have it. The rest of the world is buying what we're selling. And because we're
Yes.
selling good things, we're selling democracy, we're selling freedom, we're selling abundance, we're selling, you know, these ideas that really kind of just align with what human beings want. That's America, and that's how they see America. And that's where what you're talking
I
about.
agree.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is the things that export that really resonate with the rest of the world outside of America, this particular administration does not like. Donald Trump does not like the NBA, using LeBron James as an example.
Yeah.
You know, obviously he doesn't like USAID. He doesn't like hip hop. He walked out on Kendrick Lamar's halftime performance. There are things
Sweet, by the way.
about
Oh, yeah.
him that are completely dated. Now,
Yep.
a lot of people are like, I want to go back to that. Okay, but here's the other difference, though. Going back to those things means going back to when the United States told Russia to sit down and shut the hell up in the corner.
Sure.
You can't have it both ways. See,
Yeah.
and this is where the conflict of a Donald Trump and his administration and his policies come into play. You want the world to, quote, respect America, but you're retreating from the world as an American president. Your policy does not show leadership. Your policy shows retreat across the board.
No, it's
Across the
true.
board.
And there's value. There's real value. The Israelis had a prime minister. Gosh, I'd have to look up when he was the PM, but around the time we were in, Ehud Barak. And Barak was a former soft guy, special forces guy for Israel. Had done like some really high profile hits on PLO guys who had been involved in planning Munich. He famously dressed up as, you know, as a woman, went into Beirut and, you know, walked past the security guards and you know, took out some terrorists who had been involved in Munich, right? And Barack spoke about how important it was for Israel to maintain the moral high ground and how hard power is important. It is important for Israel as a country to be able to defend itself, you know, with the fist, right? You have to have tanks, you have to have aircraft, you have to have men and women rather, who are willing to mix it up with the enemy and protect the people in the country that they love. But you also have to be able to say with a straight face, you know, to make an argument that we're the good guys. And
Right.
when you lose that, when you lose the ability to say we're the good guys, you don't just lose, you know, this pithy argument that, you know, at cocktail party, you really lose appeal to the rest of the world. And people want to root for the United States because they see us as a winner, yet a benevolent one, right? They see us as people who, you know, no better friend, no worse enemy kind of thing. And Donald Trump doesn't get that.
No, because he comes from a world that is strictly transactional. And he believes that the only thing that matters is how much money you have. I mean, let me put it this way. There is no one that comes to mind that is Donald Trump's true friend that could care less about money or stature.
Sure.
I can't think of one person
Right.
that basically did not give him something or make him or give him an advantage in doing something. So that being said, right, you now have him as leader, technically, of the free world.
Yep.
And we have someone who does not care. As a matter of fact, outside of kowtowing to Russia, what has he said? What has he done to show that he cares about anybody else outside the United States? Now, for his followers, they're going to be like, that's exactly what we voted for. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So when the tariffs kick in, when you're paying Peter to rob Paul because, the prices of everything that you rely on a daily basis goes up, you can't be mad at the other countries because they're taking care of themselves too. And let's see how this goes. As great as America is, we can't go against the entire world by ourselves.
And there's a moral issue too. One of the organizations that Trump is going to cut is the Afghan Care, the Center for. I'm going to butcher the acronym, but it's the Coordinator of Afghan Resettlement
Afghan Relief
Efforts, Afghan Relocation Acts, I think, or something like that. And this is like the State Department entity that is taking these Afghans that we promised they could come to America because they helped us in a 20-year war, and we're shutting it down, guys. It's gone. The funding has been stripped. We're not bringing over any more Afghans unless Donald Trump or his minions give their sort of personal stamp of approval. And well, there are people who say that is exactly what I want. I don't want to see more people with accents with brown skin when I go to the grocery store. I think that's fucked up. These are guys who fought really for the United States for 20 years. These are members up here in Vermont. We've got a large community of folks who worked for the Coast Protection Force. KPF, if you didn't spend any time in Afghanistan yourself, was probably the oldest, I think it is the oldest CIA run military organization that was fighting the Haqqani network, that was fighting the Taliban, that was fighting Al-Qaeda. They were literally doing our dirty work for us. We promised them we would get them out. They could come to America with their family, and now Donald Trump is saying we're not doing it. So it's
mind-blowing to me.
And why would you sign up to help America? Right? Like, why? There are other places we have interests. You want to send American boys and girls to go to all these little brush fire places, or do you want to work through the groups who are already on the ground? And the way you do that, like Bobby's saying, is to have exercise soft power, right? To have this aspirational image of our country that gets you get further with you catch more flies with sugar than you do with vinegar, right? So
no, I agree, and not to belabor the point, but there is a moral currency that leaders of people have to exchange in.
Yep.
And we have someone in office who is supposed to be the leader, not just of the United States, but the shepherd of the free world, that does not recognize that currency. He has completely shut that off, and the entire world is shuddering from it because it took millions of lives, decades of blood, sweat, and tears to establish it. Is it perfect? No. But it is a starting point that people can use to negotiate a better future.
Yep.
Our country backs you because we believe in you, and vice versa. The Afghans that you talk about who had a choice and chose America to support them, support us at great personal sacrifice, basically having to leave the life that they knew and put themselves in mortal danger to do so.
Yep.
For us to renege on them is beyond the pale to me.
Yep.
It is absolutely insane. But we can't expect the man who has never put anybody but himself first, to include his own damn family, his father, his kids, his wives. How can we expect him to understand that?
His brother was dying in New York City. His brother was dying in New York City. He didn't
Right.
go.
No,
It's
didn't
like,
visit him.
it
Why
wasn't
would he?
like,
His father suffering from dementia. Make sure he signs everything over to me.
yeah.
Nothing in that man's DNA understands what sacrifice is for anybody else other than himself.
And
And
I mean, if
that
you
is
put
the
it,
example that we're dealing with.
I think people will learn, that that extends to his voters as well, right? Like
Yeah,
I think inevitably
yeah,
it's going to take a few months for these things to kick in, but we're cutting off, we're cutting off farmers who are selling their excess wheat and soybeans to USAID too, right? So now all these guys don't have a market to sell their product. And Donald Trump doesn't care. He doesn't care.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
I am befuddled right now at the tolerance, and I'm watching his acolytes. I don't even call them supporters anymore because it's more on the cultish end, contort themselves. Here's the litmus test that I want every Trump fan, follower, acolyte, whatever, to give themselves. If Barack Obama raided the U.S. Treasury with people like Elon Musk, only it was George Soros, would you be cool with it? If Barack Obama sent his Secretary of Defense to NATO and basically say, to hell with all of y'all, we're going to
Yeah.
capitulate to Russia, would you be cool with it? If Barack Obama froze all of the money that helps your food stamps, that helps your clinics, that helps stabilize different people all over the world, and he said, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to go to Congress. I'm just going to do it. And then finally, if Barack Obama said, basically, I am the law, I interpret what's legal and what's not, would you be cool with it?
Yeah, and Bobby, the thing that baffles me too is there are supposed to be three co-equal branches of government,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you can the courts are kind of doing their thing, right? I mean, I'm not thrilled about who sits on SCOTUS, but they're reviewing these cases as people file legal challenges to some of these illegal and extra legal moves that the Trump administration is making. But like, what is Congress doing? They're just, I mean, yes, there's a Republican majority, and Mitch McConnell's taken a couple of votes on nominees, but the whole idea behind the Constitution was that ambition checks ambition, right? So Congress, as an institution, would not want to give their power to another branch of government, and instead we've got a situation where Congress, as an institution, is just kind of rolling over and showing their neck, and it's I'm hopeful, though not overly hopeful. I'm not. I don't think this is going to happen, but man, it sure would be nice if Congress would realize that they have an institutional obligation to preserve their own power. Because if Trump takes this power away from Congress, he's not just taking power away from Democrats in Congress. He's taking power away from Republicans in Congress. And
Yes.
so that part, I have a hard time sort of
Well, I mean,
understanding.
historically, Congress and the Supreme Court have been steadfastly protective of their power granted by the Constitution.
Yeah.
For the first time in American history, to be completely honest, we have both branches of government at the highest levels capitulating to the chief executive. We've never seen this before. He has put loyalists, he's advocated for loyalists, he's campaigned for loyalists, and it has gutted the institution because, again, those two institutions stood up against him in the first term. He learned from that mistake. He advocated for people in Congress to run that were going to be fierce loyalists to him and not the Constitution. And then on top of that, he said, I'm going to try everything I can to get away with it, and I dare them to say anything about it. And so
Yep.
far, it's working. And I don't think we're going to see anything change until the midterms. And here's the thing. Who's to say that the midterms will be a fair election? Because guess who's in the seat running the elections? His people.
Yeah,
His people.
the stuff about shutting down organizations that their mandate is to prevent foreign election interference.
Yes.
You talk about tipping your
Yes.
hand, right? Like this, the guy's doing so much stuff. Even like the Trump meme coin, that's not like, I mean, that's not fucking funny, guys. Like, this is a real problem.
It's
He
mind blowing.
opened up an avenue for foreign governments and foreign
Yep.
agents to
Yep.
bribe him with no
Yep.
record.
Yep.
And, it's
Completely
not
off the books.
transparent, right? You can just buy
Right.
a bunch of Trump coin and he gets paid out of that.
Yep.
And,
Again, if Barack Obama did it, would you be cool with it? I want someone in the comments that
hey man,
supports.
he wore a tan suit, Bobby. So that's kind of the same.
Well, I'm just saying, I want someone in the comments to explain to me if Barack Hussein Obama did the same things that Donald John Trump has done in the first month in office, not only would you be cool with it, you'd advocate for it. That's all I want to know. I just want to hear someone go on record. Give me your first, your last name, because I don't this anonymous bullshit. I'm tired of that. And say, yes, I would fully back Barack Obama making how many millions of dollars off a meme coin as he goes in office. Yes, I would totally be fine with Barack Obama giving away swaths of land.
Yeah.
You know,
The meme coins, I mean, that's just the day he took office, he was like, this is how you bribe me. And
yeah,
we would do
yeah,
the same thing, right? If we had if we had the ability to bribe, I don't know, the president of China, and
unbelievable.
do it, we would be negligent in our duties as looking out for Americans. So I'm
Right.
sure that China and Russia and whomever else is buying lots of Trump meme coin right now, and we'll never know about
Wouldn't
it.
you? Wouldn't you?
Of course, of course.
We have vulnerabilities now, international and domestic. Matter of fact, the former Treasury Department workers, analysts said this is the most vulnerable the American Treasury has ever been, with Elon and his buddies running around. A 19-year-old who had the damn screen handle of big balls. And all these clowns, and I mean clowns, that are not qualified to be anywhere in the seat, getting the title of senior blankety blank blank of whatever department that they're looking in. How does that make sense to anybody? And
Crazy,
again,
man.
if Barack Obama did it and got a bunch of liberal cats straight out of college to do it, come on,
Yeah. No, I think we all know the answer. So,
come on, come
well,
on.
hey, let's talk about some badasses. That always
Yes,
cheers me up to hear about American badasses doing badass things. So
yes.
today we're going to talk about Eugene Ashley, who was a sergeant first class. He was a African American guy because we're still in February here, so we're gonna do some Black History Month. Okay, so Eugene Ashley, sergeant first class. He's in Vietnam. He's part of Fifth Special Forces Group. So Fifth Group was they're probably most famous kind of in the ether with they were the people who were inserted for Operation Jawbreaker in Afghanistan in 2001. So that was a Fifth Group team, and but they've been around for forever. Based out of Fifth Group is out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, I think, and so Sergeant First Class Ashley. Born in 1930, serves in the Korean War. When the military is still segregated, by the way, serves in the Korean War, experiences combat, goes to through the Q course, which is the basic training and selection course for the Green Berets, and goes off to Vietnam. And so he is in Vietnam in 1968, and there's what's called the Battle of Lang Vey. So this is 1968. This is during the Tet Offensive, the early hours of the Tet Offensive, between the North Vietnamese army. So this is not the Viet Cong, and trying to overrun this American unit. And Sergeant Ashley and his fellow Special Forces soldiers and some ARVN, some ARVN soldiers try to go rescue this American unit. So he leads this attack personally into North Vietnamese positions. He's fighting tanks. He's fighting NVA soldiers on the ground. He leads this assault. They're pushed back. This happens 5 times. 5 times he leads this assault against the NVA position. Each time he's wounded several times throughout it, and ultimately loses his life in the attempt. So I'm going to read part of his citation to you guys so you can hear exactly what this man did for his country. Sergeant First Class Honor, he was the senior Special Forces advisor of a hastily organized assault force whose mission was to rescue entrapped U.S. Special Forces advisors at Lang Vay. During the initial attack, by the North Vietnamese Army forces, he supported the camp with high explosive and illumination mortar rounds. So then they lose communications with the camp. They don't know if the Americans are dead or alive. He's like, we got to get these guys out. We got to get them out now. So he takes a small assault force, 5 vigorous assaults against the enemy, continuously exposing himself to a voluminous hail of enemy grenades, machine gun fire, and automatic weapons fire. Throughout these assaults, he was plagued by numerous booby-trapped satchel charges in all the bunkers on his avenue of approach. So a satchel charge, just a really big hand-carried bomb. You know, we've got in the U.S. military, we have I think it was like 40-pound satchel charges. We used to use them when we blew up stuff underwater in the SEAL teams. During his 5th and final assault, he adjusted airstrikes on top of his assault element, forcing the enemy to withdraw and resulting in friendly control of the summit of the hill. While exposing himself to intense enemy fire, he was seriously wounded by machine gun fire, but continued his mission without regard for personal safety. After this 5th assault, he lost consciousness from blood loss and was carried from the summit by his comrades, only to suffer a final fatal wound when an enemy artillery shell landed nearby. So this man led 5 assaults to save other American soldiers, called in a U.S. airstrike on his own position, and ultimately loses consciousness after he's shot up by a North Vietnamese machine gun. And as he's being carried down the hill by friendly forces, North Vietnamese artillery shell detonates nearby, killing him. And that is our badass of the week. I mean, that is just crazy.
What drives anybody? What drives anybody to be that relentless?
I don't know. I think these guys aren't even really thinking at that point. You know, there's a task that they have to complete, and they're focused on the task. And his task is, you know, to break through these NVA lines. And, you know, that's what I'm doing. But it's amazing. It's amazing when you take one step back and you're like, right, you know, and you see, I saw people do some heroic stuff. I never saw anyone do anything like that.
No.
And
no.
It's amazing to think about what men are willing to do for one another.
At some point, you would expect your survival instinct to kick in, the fight or flight reaction. You may do it one time, right? And then you'll look around and be like, okay, don't know why I did that, made it through that. Whew, can't do that again. Right?
Like, oh, that was a good effort. That was a good.
Right. But then they'll be like, I got to go. There is a pivot point in the decision matrix where logic fails. Logic fails. Emotion overrides. Focus of effort becomes the mission. And I don't know if the average person will ever come close to that point. At least I hope they don't. Right? But here's the thing. At the end of the day, all these stories have pretty much one thing in common to me, and that is literally the selflessness piece. We live in a very selfish society now. It's overwhelming selfish. I mean, we're damn near narcissistic. Everybody tweets about themselves. Everybody films themselves. I mean, the selfie is a thing. And it's not just a picture. It is a concept of how people now view themselves in relation to others. And you keep hearing, and we keep talking about these stories of people who were like, It's not going to be about me. Matter of fact, hell, it's not even about necessarily the mission. It's about the person that I need to go help. It's about this person over here, where it's like, I value someone else's life more than my own. That is such a radical concept now. I mean, it's a
I
radical
think you
concept
hit it
again,
right on
but
the
definitely
head,
now.
man. I think you hit it right on the head, and that's what real masculinity is to me. To me, being a man and being good at being a man is about what you do for others and not what you do for yourself. And traditionally, the traditional ideals of masculinity I would say have aligned with that, right? We've always recognized sort of physical courage and physical bravery, and I think we're right to do so. I think that is important in on planet Earth to be physically courageous, but nobody you don't get recognized for physical courage and valor. Um, you get recognized for it in the construct of you're doing something for someone else, right? So implied in military medals and things like that are you are doing something, and by doing this act, you're helping other people because
Right.
they don't have to take the risk, right? And
No.
so that's a concept we should explore as we go on with this podcast. But I think real men don't make people around them afraid. They make people around them feel safe. Like that's right. Like when I'm around some dude, there were dudes in the SEAL teams. I was like, oh, cool, Nate's on this op. Like we're good,
Yep.
right? Like, and
Yep.
that's kind of like where you want to be. And these CMH winners are the epitome of that. So, well,
No. And I think to just wrap this up,
yeah,
I think that spirit is still out there with people, with young men in particular, but young American men. But I think it has been pushed to the back pages of our society, and we need to bring it back to the forefront and say, no, this is the standard that you strive for, not this other self-aggrandizing stuff that you've been exposed to here recently. And I
yeah.
think that is something that will help bring us back to where we need to be as a nation.
And there's a difference between moral courage and physical courage, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and we should talk more about that. But in general, the way I think of it, physical courage is you win the MMA fight, or you charge the
Right.
machine gun nest, or you go into the house fire and drag out the children or whatever, and that's
Yep.
important. That is important. But our society is set up so that there's esteem and reward for physical courage in a way that there's not for moral courage, because moral courage is only relevant when by definition you're going against the grain, right? You're speaking out about something, you're going against the crowd. And otherwise there's no courage required, right? The courage of moral courage is in many ways, many real ways, harder than running into the house to drag the dog out or whatever. So speaking of courage, though, we got some awesome fights this weekend, Bobby. I'm excited. And guys, pet peeve of mine is how late these fights on. I'm getting old, and this one's in Riyadh. So it's actually at 1 in the afternoon on Saturday. It's perfect. Okay. So we have got part two of Dimitri Bivol and Artur Beterbiev. And it was a great first fight. It was back in October. And these are both by birth Russian fighters. And Beterbiev actually trains up in Canada, not too far from where I am. He's up in Montreal. And Montreal's a great fight town. A lot of good fighters come out of Montreal. And Beterbiev has a very kind of distinct style. The closest, in boxing, we talk about different fight styles. And so a lot of them are kind of regional in a way. The American boxing has a style to it. European boxing has a style to it. Cuban boxing has a style to it. And, by and large, you've got this good sort of Dmitry Bivol, excellent fighter, beat Canelo, who's one of my favorite fighters, although Canelo was up like 5 weight classes. So Bivol, yeah, he has this classic kind of in and out Soviet style. So back in the day when, the Olympic boxing still mattered, you had American amateur style versus Soviet amateur style. And the Soviets, the Eastern Bloc, were very much about in and out, right? You get in, you throw your punches, you get out. Straight line, kind of in and out, throwing lots of kind of long hooks, lots of crosses, lots of 1-2s, really kind of loose and just, and lengthy combinations. American boxing, by and large, is about cutting angles laterally. So getting off to the side, finding angles where you can sneak shots. An angle in boxing being, I created a temporary situation where I can hit you and you can't hit me back. And Americans hunt angles, and that's our boxing style. And so Better Beef is a little more of kind of a North American, and Mexican boxing style. Mexican boxers, notorious pressure fighters. Mexican boxers like to come in and take ground and always be pressuring, always make sure that the guy is on defense, fighting off the back foot, so to speak. And we saw a lot of that in the first round, the first fight with these guys. And it's going to be a great fight. I'm really excited for it. And on the undercard, it's kind of a stacked undercard, too. So you've got Shakur Stevenson, who is fighting a late minute replacement, this guy, Josh Padley. And Padley's, he's a fine fighter, but he's English. He's 16-0 with 4 knockouts. Shakur Stevenson is a silver medalist from 2016. Very talented fighter. He's a world champ, undefeated at this point. Padley's got maybe 4 knockouts and then 12 decision victories, and that's not how you want to go a fight with a guy like Shakur Stevenson. 4 knockouts at a pro level, at a world champ level, is not very many knockouts.
Right.
Guys like Better Beef's, 38-0 or 38-0-1 now.
Real dumb question. Is this because he lacks power or he's not aggressive?
So it's a power thing, right? Like all these guys have power. They all have power. Boxing and power is transfer of energy. People who've got pop in boxing, like pop in their hands, are people who are good at they'd be good at swinging a baseball bat or a tennis racket, right? It's that hip rotation, going from transferring weight from your back foot to your front foot and doing it quickly. And so you get guys who are successful, Paulie Malignaggi, who was a very good fighter, very active fighter, very fast. Amir Khan, very fast fighters, but they don't have a lot of knockout power. And, and so that does not bode well. If you don't have the ability to stop someone and make them afraid of your punch, you're going to have a real hard time kind of disincentivizing what they like to do. And combat sports are all about, just like football, I'm sure, right? You want to, if the team likes to run and you can take away the run, I mean, they're fucked, right? So,
right.
It's similar. If you can take away someone's jab and all of a sudden they're scared to throw a jab, it's a problem for them. So, great fights this weekend, guys. Check it out. I think it's on DAZN, and it's not that expensive I think it's $25 for the fights. So,
that's not bad for pay-per-view.
That's not bad. I mean,
for international,
are running 70, 80, $100 these days. Yeah. So I'm excited about it.
Well, I'm definitely going to try to check it out because I'm just now getting into this international world of boxing and MMA again.
Nice.
I followed it like 15 years ago when it was not as mainstream as it is now. So
early 2000s MMA, man, great,
vicious,
great.
vicious. So now it's a little bit, it's a little bit more streamlined, more acceptable. But one of the things we want to leave you guys with, I mentioned in the intro, Congressman John Lewis, someone who, in my neck of the woods, Atlanta, is a huge name and huge legacy. And the reason I want to bring him up is because, he had this phrase about getting into good trouble. And right now, I know a lot of people feel like they're being overwhelmed by what's happening. It's happening internationally. It's happening domestically. It's affecting your everyday lives. The cost of things going through the roof. It seems like your basic rights are being taken away or assaulted. And a lot of people, quite frankly, are scared. They're disengaging. Whatever coping mechanism they have, they're trying to deal with. Now, that's not to say that there aren't people who are thrilled by what's happening. But if you look at the polls that have just recently come out, the majority of people are like, what the hell is going on? And so I mentioned John Lewis because the man spent his entire life in the service of others, right? He was a son of sharecroppers out of Alabama, dirt poor. And when he was in school, he was part of this group called SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, that started the lunch counter sit-ins. And they were abused, beat down, spat upon, you name it, it happened to them. And it caught the attention of a young Dr. King, Dr. Martin Luther King. And John Lewis became the youngest man to speak at the March on Washington in 1963, where Dr. King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. But John Lewis was not just about talking. He was about action. To quote Marshawn Lynch, she was about that action, boss. And as a man still in his young 20s, he stood at the Edmund Pettus Bridge and later in the 1960s, 1965, I think to be exact, and stared down the absolute devil of white supremacy and got his face beat in, got assaulted, and went to jail multiple times. But in that day, damn near died. And when asked about it, he's like, you have to get into good trouble. You have to challenge evil directly. You have to challenge injustice directly. Now, this guy is not just somebody. I got to meet this man multiple times. As a matter of fact, his wife and my mom had the same hairdresser. And when I was at the academy, when I was at Annapolis working in admissions and I had to talk to members of Congress about nominations, the man left the congressional floor to talk to me about how important it is to find the best and brightest leaders in his district to become future leaders of America's military. He wanted to hear it from me. It was two people that did that, him and Elijah Cummings, the late great Elijah Cummings out of Baltimore. Mm-hmm. They would talk to me. As a matter of fact, they had me visit all the schools in their districts because they understood that you got to go find the best and the brightest. It just doesn't show up, and it's not just because you look a certain way or you have certain parents and this, that, and the other. Go find it. And right now, I could literally hear this man say, you've got to stand up to the things that you see happening right now. So the reason that Dan and I are doing podcasts like this, the reason we decided to take on these issues is because when you have people like him and countless other Americans that stood up in absolute fear, but they did it anyway. We inherit that legacy, and we have to be the next generation to do it. Ronald Reagan did say something that was very, very, very true. Freedom is not something that's inherited. It's not a birthright. It has to be given to the next generation to fight and defend, and then they pass it on to the next one. Right now, we have, in my humble opinion, and Dan's humble opinion, the most existential internal threat to the United States in the way it has become a country in its history. We're watching things be gutted, institutions be handicapped, but most importantly, we see a malaise by the people who are supposed to check and provide the balance for United States governance. Call your congresspeople, call your senators, flood the lines of news media, tell them that this is wrong. Because my litmus test is very simple. If the opposition party was to do the same things that are happening right now, those of you who are cool with these actions, would you still be cool with it? Mm-hmm. If the answer is no, then we have a problem. This goes beyond politics. This goes to the absolute fabric and sanctity of the American experiment. And I say experiment because that's what it is. Even though it's been around for 250 years, it's still an experiment.
Yep.
And anything could derail this experiment, and we will be the next version of Rome.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks, Bobby, as always. And guys, the final thing I would want to say too is, like, this is a winnable fight, right? This is not impossible. This is a winnable fight. Midterms are two years away, and we can stop what's going on. And in the meantime, there are avenues, and the biggest one is just public opinion. So, thanks so much for listening, guys. Couldn't have said it better myself. Next week, we've got some major updates on the Zizian case that we talked about a couple weeks ago. It turns out that the leader, Ziz, has been arrested, and we'll have more details on that next week. But thanks for listening, as always, and hope to see you again soon.
Yep. Thanks, guys.